My Lords, it's only 6 months ago that we were describing the chaotic retreat from Afghanistan as the biggest failure of Western foreign policy for decades. That was a fair description, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine tops it. Because the invasion isn't simply a success of Russian military strength. It's an equal failure of the West's collective failure to recognise that Putin was pursuing an aggressive forward foreign policy which was aimed not just at those territories which he wished to control, but also at the values of democracy, rule of law, which they embodied, and a subsequent failure on our part to take measures to counter this. This invasion follows other Russian power grabs in Crimea, Georgia and Moldova, and increasing Russian influence more broadly in the Middle East and Africa. And these advances have simply not been met with a serious Western response. Afghanistan and Ukraine must now impel the UK to reassess its own place in the world and the extent to which it's prepared to make an effort to promote its own values against those who aggressively reject them. This isn't going to be accomplished quickly, but if we're to avoid future Ukraines, future Afghanistans, we need to start this reassessment urgently now. I'd like to suggest today just 4 areas for consideration. First, we need to be realistic about Britain's strengths and weaknesses. We are not a global military power, despite the government's hubristic rhetoric. The pivot to the east was a major strategic mistake and should be reversed. So was the decision to cut the number of troops. This cut should also be reversed. Second, our most important security and economic relationships are with Europe. Windy talk. Windy talk of global Britain cuts no ice when the Russians can seize a friendly European democracy. Post-Brexit, the UK has not been part of European non-NATO discussions on security and foreign policy. We have not, for example, been in the room as the rest of Europe has planned its sanctions against Russia. We've been devoid of influence and have not been able to use our weight to help stiffen the resolve of those who have doubts about taking a firm line. And we need to find some mechanism for being a full participant in European policymaking on civilian security and defence policy. Thirdly, we need to strengthen global structures and programmes which promote our values. With Russia and China on the Security Council, this isn't going to be easy. But we should, at the very least, do what we can within our own powers and resources to begin to address this. Reinstating the cuts to development assistance would be an easy start. And fourth, my lords, we should set an example in the way in which our leaders behave. We should be principled, honest, knowledgeable and robust. That's how you gain respect and influence. I realise that it's completely impossible to contemplate this under this government. But we remain a democracy, and this government will in due course be replaced. All these issues, my lords, will take time to work through, but we are faced with immediate challenges today. On sanctions, we had a full discussion of these on the statement yesterday, and I won't reprise the arguments I made then. But I would ask the Noble Lord the Minister to respond to reports in the press today that the otherwise inexplicable reason why we have not named Gazprom and Rosneft, as well as oligarchs such as Roman Abramovich, as subject to sanctions, is that we do not have the legal resources to fight any challenge which that might bring. Can the Noble Lord reassure me that this is not the case, and that these entities and individuals will now, as they should be sanctioned? My Lord, sanctions deal with the Russian involvement in our economy, but there are also outstanding issues relating to possible Russian involvement in our politics. As the Noble Lord Collins said, the government's been woefully slow and indeed negligent in failing to act on the recommendations of the Russia report. Can the Noble Lord Minister give the House an assurance that these will now be pursued with vigour? And in particular, will the government now release any evidence it has of Russian interference in British politics, whether it deems it to have been successful or not? My Lords, one of the most predictable results of the invasion is that there will be large numbers of refugees. What is the UK's position on this? We understand that British troops have been sent to Poland to help with the evacuation of Ukrainian citizens. What part, though, do we intend to play in their resettlement? All Ukrainian citizens will be allowed to enter the UK on a Ukrainian passport. Will they be similarly allowed to enter the UK? In particular, can the government confirm that it will allow family reunion for Ukrainian citizens who have relatives in the UK and are fleeing the country? And will the government also consider granting visas to Ukrainians who are working for UK companies in Ukraine, often in tech-related roles, who might now wish to come and live and work here? Finally, could we have more clarity on what the government plans to do to support our NATO allies in Eastern Europe? We were told yesterday that 2 fighters were being dispatched to Cyprus to patrol NATO's southeastern borders. This is welcome, my Lords, but surely it's not enough. The next potential targets for Putin are the Baltic states. Nobody thinks he's going to invade them tomorrow, but surely we now need to provide them with much more military support. The Estonians, I know, are extremely grateful for the British-led contingent of 1,200 NATO troops, which are now stationed on their border with Russia. But they're under no illusion that this is anything other than a tripwire and will be rapidly swept aside in the event of any Russian advance. The Noble Lady referred to this in her speech, but could the Noble Lord, in winding up, give more details of exactly what is now planned in terms of reinforcing those troops, and also what plans NATO might have for reinforcing its equally small contingents in the other Baltic states? My Lords, as a young man, I visited Voroshilovgrad, now renamed Luhansk, as leader of the first ever British youth delegation to Russia, following the signing of the Helsinki Agreement. The Noble Lord Locke Pickles was also a member of this delegation, and it was a most notable period. We stayed in Luhansk in a hotel built by German prisoners of war. Grim history was all around us, but we and our Russian interlocutors genuinely believed that we were at the start of a process which would mean that wars in Europe were a thing of the past. It therefore makes me weep today to see what's happening in Luhansk. We must deal as best as we can with today's tragedy in Ukraine, but we must also make sure that it doesn't become a model for future tragedies of the future. Amen.